All right, here we are. We're here with another episode of the Parent Book Club.
We are.
I'm Bridget, this is Vincent, and we are going to go through Siblings Without Rivalry, because we both have siblings, and it was pretty fierce. Not for Dr. Vin. He was the champion. He was good at everything he did. Right?
I don't know if that means there wasn't rivalry.
For him, there wasn't rivalry. I can't say that word very well. For my brother and I, there was an incredible amount of rivalry, but he ended up
I
winning.
just think it's interesting. I think it was interesting just with the title, because reading the book, I was like, or just hearing about the book, I was like, siblings, I don't even know what that means, siblings without rivalry. I would have changed the title completely if she asked me about it.
What would you have changed it to?
Siblings without fighting.
Oh.
Because rivalry is like going to war with each other, I guess. I guess in that context it makes sense. But I think essentially the book just talks a lot about how do you have a household that's peaceful.
Yeah, but I think it's also
Trying to get that way at least.
Yeah, so Dr. Vin is from a family of 3 boys, and I have a very convoluted family because both my parents were married 3 times. But I have one brother who is 13 months younger than me, and we went at it quite a bit. We fought a lot.
We fought a lot too, but I didn't think a lot in the context that this book talked about.
Oh no, me and Bruce were just like this book. But you guys wrestled.
We did, yeah.
But you were play fighting. So if somebody had said, well, maybe you weren't. Dr. Vin was bigger than his brothers. The majority of his, he could take him down right now. And our son's biggest thing is that he would like to beat up daddy. Yeah. And basically my husband's determined for that never to be a factor. And it's like, it's never going to happen. So I tell him all the time, so you can work really hard. I don't know if daddy's ever going to let you. So we're going to dive into this book and just give tips to you guys about how to talk to your kids so that they understand what's going on, when you should intervene, when you should not intervene. These authors wrote How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. We are actually doing that book next month, but for the little kids, so specifically for ages 2 to 7, because it's very different once you hit 7, because your baby's brain is completely different. At 7 years old, they get the age of reason. And so there are some older topics in here, but a lot of it has to do with having a baby brother, baby sister, and the jealousy that goes in with that. And so we have a lot of different sibling dynamics in our team. We've got I have a 15-year age gap with my 2 older sisters. I know that one of our team has that. You're 3 boys. We've got another team member with 3 girls. We've got another team member with an older brother and then an adopted brother. So there's just a lot of dynamics that are covered that all work in this book. So we're excited to share it with you.
Absolutely. So the different chapters are brothers and sisters, past and present. That one just kind of sets the tone for the whole book. Not till the bad feelings come out, and there's a very good analogy that she uses in that section. The peril of comparison, which I never really considered, but thinking about how she worded it and phrased it, I thought that there was a lot of good insight in there. Same thing with equal is less. Like, man, I love you guys the same. We'll talk about why that may not come across that way.
Those 2 chapters made me feel like I suck at parenting, just to put that out there for everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely the default.
Yeah. It's the easiest way to parent.
Yeah. Let no one lock a child into a role. I feel like that and the peril of comparisons are similar. And then when the kids fight, and then how do you overcome that? What that looks like. So this first paragraph I took from the introduction. It says, the experts in the field seem to agree the root of sibling jealousy is each child's deep desire for the exclusive love of his parents. Your child needs to survive and thrive. It is the sunlight of parental love and encouragement that enables a child to grow in confidence and slowly gain mastery over his environment. And the book talks about how, through all the different categories, how it can affect your child's understanding and feeling of love towards them, and how you have just competing interests with different kids. And so, that's what the book covers.
I also thought it was really interesting because they talk about how people have siblings for their kids and then realize that their kids hate their siblings. And hate is a very strong word, but the parents' idea and the idea that one day when you have kids, if you don't have kids yet, is that you are wanting to create a family. You want to have this team, this group of individuals that all shares the same last name and that all moves in the same direction. It means something to be part of your last name. But pretty much it feels like they hate each other. And as a mother who stays home with her kids a lot, it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and they push each other's buttons, they push your buttons, and they push you right to the brink. And so we see these mythical children that are kind to each other and love each other. And I mean, my son has a kid in his class, and his little sister and him, and she just dotes on him and he just dotes on her, and maybe they fight, but never in public, whereas my children are trying to do WWE reenactments on a daily basis.
Yeah, and the book talks about how when you are growing up and you're thinking about having a family, you never think that's going to be you, and you're like, oh, that's bad parenting, or those are bad kids, and when I have kids, it's never going to be that way. And then,
lo and behold,
yeah, just give it time.
It's a bunch of personalities all in one house that no one planned, only God planned, and he loves to laugh at us.
Yeah, and the other people say is like, well, maybe the siblings are just meant to fight, and that's just how it's designed to be. And in on the chapter on fighting, the author listed out a bunch of different reasons. I think it was like a group setting. You're just getting different ideas from the other parents as to like why kids do fight. And one of them that was almost shocking to me was that brothers and sisters fight because of sexual energy they have towards each other, and that's how you essentially like get pushed away. It's like, that's
wild.
Crazy.
Wild to think about.
Definitely never crossed my mind.
And I feel like when you read that, you can be like, that, like they have sexual energy, like they want to be sexual with each other, but no, they're just like girls and boys and what they're feeling, and they're like, oh, well, I think that, and so they are feeling those things, and then they can't voice them to, let's say, our son liked a girl at class, but he couldn't deal with it. He's going to take that out on his sister because she represents femininity to him. So more in that way.
Yeah, and that's exactly the example that he used in the book as well. And then there's another one where there was this older brother who was fighting with his younger brother, and the dad jokingly said to the older brother, he's like, oh, isn't it fun to pick on your little brother? He's like, yeah, that's how I get power for when I play soccer. It's like, so he gained so much power over, and just in himself, by how he treated his brother, but he was using that for a specific advantage later on. And so there's many of the little dynamics that, again, you don't really consider when you are having kids and building a family, but that are hugely important.
Especially when you don't know what you're going to have, right? You're like, let's have another kid, and then you get to find out what it is, because you're like, oh, I bet I could do all boys. I thought I was going to do all boys. I have a boy and 2 girls now. God help us.
Yeah. And so in this section, the author, she had a really good takeaway. We're just, for the next 2 weeks, observe what stirs up things between your kids. Write down the incidents or conversations that distress you. And she said, just by doing that, just by turning the focus from I have to fix this to what is happening, that can greatly reduce the stress that you feel when your kids are fighting and bickering. So there's a lot of action step.
Yes, there's a lot of homework.
Yeah. This book was really well laid out, just as far as like, here are very good takeaways that you could just implement. And so we'll start with the first one. So not till the bad feelings come out. Do you want to tell the spouse example?
So, this is going to just rock you to your core. So they were like, imagine this. And if you are a husband listening to this, change the words to wife. But your husband, and so I'm talking to women because majority we talk to women. So your husband says, hey, listen, I am going to bring home a new wife. And she's really awesome, and she's different than you, and she's going to be a part of our family team now, okay? She's younger, cuter. Everyone gives her more attention.
The clothes that don't fit you don't fit her.
They fit her, yeah. Literally, it went on and on and on. And it was like, how do you feel? And in my head, I was like, I want to punch my husband hard. Yeah, that's what I want to do. But it went on, and it was like, oh, well, and then talked about how you feel about this new wife. And when he comes home, he says hi to her first. But he's like, but I still love you. I love you just the same. Like, he's like, and you're still really important to me. The new wife just needs some more, like, help getting to know the house and everything. But you'll help her, right? You'll help the new wife get in. You'll help the new wife get settled. And, like, all of a sudden you have, like, all these fiery feelings coming up. And you're like, no. And this is exactly what a child feels like when another child is born. And it's just, that was very earth-shattering to me.
Me too. Yeah, and so she gives 4 tips on things you can do when these feelings arise in your kids, because it's going to happen, whether it's over toys or
because you would feel if you were another wife, right, that you would be like, well, it's not fair, or that was what we used to do. Like, you used to come and say hello to me, and so they would start to like be angry. And the other thing that they said is like, would you want to hurt that girl, right? Like when we got through to the chapters, it was like, do you want to hurt the new wife? And the answer is like, yeah, I want to hurt her. I want to make her less cute. I want to make her look bad. I want to set her up for failure. And so we
don't want to share your toys with her.
I don't want to share my toys, especially my husband, with her. And so all of these feelings that we see our kids feel, if we were put in the same situation, which we talk a lot when we're talking to parents about sharing, like, nobody wants to share. So if somebody walked in here as an adult and you're eating a sandwich that you purchased, you've been looking forward to the sandwich all day, you go to take a bite of it, and then somebody's like, well, give half of your sandwich to Vincent because he's hungry too. You're like, no, this is my sandwich. Or it's like, oh, I see that you're in the middle of doing something on your phone. It's your spouse's turn to use your phone. And what do you think? Your spouse has their own phone. Why do they need my phone? And so sharing doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Forcing kids to share does not make sense. And so you wouldn't want to share, and you wouldn't want a new wife to come in. And so the fact that you are going to have more children is a given. So what you could do to prep your child before that is huge. But when they're dealing with the hard things, like our son, when we had our second baby, said, I wish the baby would leave. And you would say, oh my gosh, you can't say that, Vincent. That's so mean. You shouldn't say that you don't want the baby to be here. You can say, wow, it must be really hard to have another baby. It must be hard to have a baby. She's always crying. Mommy always has to feed her. And there's not as much time to be cuddled. I bet that's hard. Is it hard? And he'll say yes. And that's acknowledging those feelings. And if we can say, instead of saying like, don't feel these things, it's, oh, I see your feelings. And I'll label them for you to help them learn how to label their feelings, right? And then and that's it. And you acknowledge it. So you're not saying, oh, it's not going to happen anymore. You just say, oh, it must be hard.
Yes, and that's what it talks about in the whole brain child, where especially kids, the younger that they are, they don't necessarily have that vocabulary to even say what they are feeling. And so just by labeling it, you must be feeling hurt, sad, angry, then that in and of itself starts the diffusion process of that emotion, because now they can say, yeah, I am feeling that. Or even if you're wrong, just by trying to say, that must, like, I could see how that could be angry. They could say, I'm not angry, I'm sad.
Karen, our daughter, will tell you, I'm not upset, I'm mad. Mad I am. That's what she'll say. She's upset is not her choice word.
Yeah.
She's angry.
Yeah, but so just by acknowledging that feeling and not saying, oh, you don't feel that way, the book and the example in the book was the exact same thing with a younger sibling, and the baby was like, let's throw the baby in the river and send it to Australia, because that's where the grandparents were. Let's throw it in the garbage truck. And the mom was like horrified. Mm-hmm. It's like, how do you, like, can't even imagine having those feelings. And then you just say, oh, I can see that this, and so one of the things she said is that, oh, you don't mean, instead of saying, oh, you don't mean that, you love her, you can say, you don't want her here. Sometimes you wish she'd go away. And that's the second part, is like, give them in fantasy what they don't have in reality, just so they can see and even just ponder that thought. Just say, like, do I really want her gone? Because if the child can start contemplating that again, it takes them, this again goes back to the whole brain child, it takes them out of their frustration in their current left brain, these are all the facts realm, and it puts them into this imaginative right brain realm, which helps their brain calm down. And then you could just tailor that and transition that right into helping them use creative means to process that. And one of the things she said is, it seems like you are angry, frustrated, whatever. Can you draw what you are feeling? And take the facts of that left brain part and where all the emotion is getting built up from, and just say, how can we channel that into creative means? Drawing, talking, singing, doing something that is a creative realm to take again the sting out of that negative emotion.
And then the last one is about using your words instead. And I think our kids are very good at using their words because we've tried a lot reading all of these books with you guys to tell them how to like say what they're doing. But and one of the things is like, don't punch, just tell your sister how angry you are with words and not fists. We've even had our kids be like, I wanted to hit them but I didn't. We're like, that's right, buddy, you didn't When you want to say, way to go, great job, which you cannot say, which we learned in the Danish way of parenting and High Gallery Parent. You could say it, but if you're trying not to say good job, which is the most paralyzing thing to give to an American parent in the entire world, that's what you would say. You sure didn't. But when the next step of that is when they're like, well, I'm mad at you and you're stupid and dumb, then you're like, well, you can tell them how mad you are, but we need to do it without calling them names. And one of the biggest things was, if you don't want your kids to call each other names, you have to stop calling them names, because they got those names from you.
Yeah, and I think this goes into labels, and that's even good names, like smart and strong and all of those things.
Yeah, Vincent said the other day, he's like, I'm just not good at this. Yeah. Karen is. And I was like, well, you could get better. Like, you can work on it. But that's comparison. Segue.
Yep, so the next chapter, the peril of comparisons. And this is where it just says avoid comparisons completely. So instead of saying, oh, you are stronger or you are bigger, just describe what you feel or what you are seeing. Just say like, man, Vincent, you picked up all the toys. And that's it. Not saying you are a better picker-upper than your sister.
Yeah. Or, gosh, that was so helpful that you picked up all those toys. One night, Vincent really wanted to watch a show. My kids know that they don't get to watch a lot of shows, but if the living room is clean, the likelihood that I would say yes to the show. And so I was putting the baby to sleep. Karen had fallen asleep early, like on a ride home from somewhere. And so it was just him. And I was like, hey, listen, I'm going to put the baby to sleep. And he's like, okay, mommy. And then I hear like all this noise, and I was about to be like, Vincent, be quiet. I was like, this sounds like cleaning up noise. And I walk out after I got the baby down and Karen's still asleep, and Vincent's like, Mommy, I cleaned this room. How about a show? And I was like, yes, man. Yes, we can watch a show. And I said, gosh, that's so helpful to me, Vincent. Like, when this is all cleaned up, it helps mommy feel not so crazy or not so stressed out. Because I tell them all the time when we're clean, like, why do we always have to clean? I was like, because a messy house makes mommy feel messy in her head. And we don't want that, because that's when I yell, and that's when I get stressed out, and that's when I say no to everything. So if you want more yeses, then we need to have a clean environment. And so Vincent, at 6, he turned 6 this week, is slowly getting that. So also know that if you just have a 3-year-old, wait. But you do the work at 3, the time is coming. Vincent cleaned up the room all by himself, and I had to work really hard not to say good job.
Yeah, and we talked about this last month in the Danish way of parenting, where the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation is your child has a desire to do this thing for their own internal purposes, as opposed to an extrinsic motivator is your child is doing this thing to get a positive compliment from a parent, just saying, good job, you're so smart. And again, that's typically the default that we have as parents, but what the research is showing is that can take away from your child's intrinsic motivation and their desire to do it. And so what will happen if your child is exclusively or mostly extrinsically motivated, when that motivation is gone, then their desire to perform whatever activity it is going to be diminished. Whether that's studying, whether that's reading, whether that's cleaning. If they don't have that extrinsic motivation pushing them towards that, there's not that internal drive to do it for the sole purpose of doing that activity, which is a thing that we want to try to avoid. And so the example that she gave is, you can say that, I see that you, whatever, instead of saying, I wish your brother was more like you, or you don't clean up, or you don't eat your food. I did this one yesterday. It's like, you're not eating your food like the baby is eating their food. Like, the baby is eating more food than you are. And I shouldn't have said that. But
we mess up all the time, folks. We're all learning. Yeah. It's the first time I read this book, so just know we are not pros. Not pros. Yeah. Just pros at learning.
Yeah, it's true. And so that's the second one, is avoid unfavorable comparisons as well. It's just like, describe what the problem is and what needs to be done, as opposed to saying what I just said, your sister is eating more than you, or your brother is a better cleaner than you are. Because then that starts this comparison thing. And again, the whole point of this book is to try to avoid this head-to-head combat that our kids are going to have.
For our love.
For our love, right. Yeah. And that could very easily be construed that way. Again, if you go back to the example, if I had a sister wife and said, man, I wish you cleaned like Bridget cleaned. Like, my sister wife, your sister wife, I
my
don't know who she
sister
is.
wife, your wife,
she would have resentment towards Bridget because of that statement. Again, if we just put it through that lens and through that filter, so much of the stuff that we see, we have planted the seeds for, and now it's just taking fruit, and we don't like what the fruit looks like.
So labeling what you want to have done. So in that example with Vincent, I could have said, hey, I'm going to put the baby down. Will you clean the room? And if you clean the room, we can watch a show. All I said to Vincent was, Karen is asleep. I'm going to put the baby down. Can you just play quietly? That's all I said to him. Because I wasn't going to put any, I was just going to be happy if he could play quietly, which he can at 5, almost 6 years old. He can play quietly if his sisters aren't there to torture him, which truly, he is a very reactive kid. Like, he doesn't start stuff with Karen, he finishes it. Whereas Karen is an instigator. And so because she likes to see everybody get wild, because she's wild. So she's like, let's turn up the volume in this house. And so in that, I took away that extrinsic, like, if you clean this, we can watch a show, which is what I have done a lot of other times. But he was like, I want to watch a show. So if I clean, I bet she'll say yes. Because I also don't always say yes. But he is starting to learn the process of what it's like to be on the family team versus like, oh, and he didn't think, oh, I know my mom's going to think I'm so great. But he was so proud. His dimples were flashing when he came and he was like, da-da, can we watch a show? And I was like, yes, man, thank you so much. And the process is like, hey, there's
so
this room here.
The actual step. So
if you want to, if you see a comparison that like, oh, well, Karen put away all her shoes, Vincent, but you never do. What you could say is, oh, I see that your shoes are on the floor, and that bothers me. These shoes belong in the cubby. And then Vincent could run over, put his shoes away, and I can say, I appreciate that. I really like not walking in and tripping over shoes. Mm-hmm. Or in this slide, the example is the jackets from the book. And so I labeled all those things that I talked about myself. I also didn't say it makes me sad when the hallway looks neat or it makes me angry, because I don't want to make them feel like what they do is what my emotions are, because as an adult we are in control of our emotions. So if we throw a temper tantrum, it's not because our kid pushed us to there. You allowed yourself to have a temper tantrum. Also, just putting that out there, fun fact, the front of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, that yours is fully formed if you're 25 years old. So your kid literally doesn't have that part of their brain that gives them the executive function not to lose their mind, but you have it. So if you are throwing a tantrum or you're losing control of your emotions, which we all do, you actually have the executive function to be able to control yourself in that situation where they don't. So understand that too as we're going through all of these things.
Yeah, so the process for comparison is describe what you see first, then describe what you feel based off of what you saw, then describe what needs to be done. And once it's done, describe what you see and describe what you feel. So now you can complete that whole story cycle, and you never have to mention your brother, like your sister. It's just all about what you are seeing and what you are feeling, not in relation to what your children are doing.
Yeah.
And so with that, equal is less, and this was one that really shocked me because I don't feel like our kids have asked us this. I feel like
Karen has.
Who's your favorite? She asked you that?
Yeah.
Well, they've never asked me who my favorite is. But the typical answer is, oh, I love all of you equally. Like, it's all the same. But to them, that means that they are less. And so if I had sister wives and I said, oh, Bridget, I love you just as much as I love this person, to Bridget, that would mean that she is less than this person.
Yeah. Because it's the same, and I'm a unique individual.
Correct.
And that's the thing that I think they really laid out. So one of the examples is they were reading the book. This woman had 2 kids. Their names were Roy and Billy, and they read Billy Goat Scruff. If you don't know it, it's a little fairy tale thing. And at the end of it, the little boy Roy sobbed, and he was like, "Why isn't there a Roy Goat Scruff?" And I was like, wow, like all you heard in your mind as a mother, you're like, oh, I'm just going to read them this cute story, Billy Goat Scruff. And all he heard was Billy versus Roy, and that Roy doesn't have a goat scruff. And that is wild. Wild to think about. But if we bought a book that says Karen in it, then we need a book that says Vincent in it, and then we need a book that's Nora in it. Now, in the 21st century, you can order books with your kid's name in it, so go hard, but then you're making it equal. And so what we know is that there's different love languages for kids. There's different ways that kids feel seen, heard. There's like our son loves quality time. Our daughter loves words of affirmation. And the baby, obviously, we have no idea what she is yet. She's 10 months old. She's a character, but we have no idea what she needs. And so making sure that we give them those things and loving them in the way that they are. So Vincent wants to be rough and he wants this physical, like he wants to wrestle with daddy more than anything. Well, that's not really Karen's favorite. But yesterday I was tickling Honora and we were having a good time and Karen helped me get the baby ready for bed and everything. And then once the baby is done, she's like, can you tickle me like you tickled Honora? And just like, Karen has really started to like act more like a baby and do baby things because she sees how much attention Honora is getting. And so that's where we see a lot of regression in kids when they have the next baby, whether it's your second, third, or fourth, is that they start to be like, oh, the baby's getting more trouble, so I'm gonna do it. We'll see toddlers pee their pants again, even if they're potty trained. We'll see them trying to come back into the bed, like those things like that. And so understanding like you have a unique identity with each kid, and that you don't want to be like, well, I think Karen is beautiful. So many of the parents that shared in this book, because she had these like little groups of parents she was training on this, were like, oh, my sister was the beautiful one. So many. Like I am talking, or my brother was the stronger or faster one. He was always good in athletics. And they were like, and they were so jealous of that person, and their parents always were like, oh, you have the most beautiful hair, oh, she has the most, oh, she always looks nice, why don't you look nice? Like just trying to get their kid to be the other kid instead of honing in. And so right now our daughter Karen is like, I really want my hair to be flat. She has corkscrew curls and she will brush her hair so hard. She's 4 years old. Brush her hair so hard to make the top flat because she wants flat hair. Do you know who has flat hair? Honora, the baby. And so as Honora's hair changes and everything, Karen's gonna want her hair to be like that, even though everyone in the world compliments Karen on her hair. Like there's not a person that doesn't say, oh, your hair is so beautiful, oh, I love your curls. But she is only seeing love at a different, for flat hair, because her brother and sister have flat hair. And so that's what she wants. And so honing in on like her unique, how fun she is, and with her curls reflecting her personality, is something that we can do to show that unique love.
I think the essence of what the book was talking about, which again made so much sense, was that if you give each person equally, then what the child can presume is that they are not going to have your time and attention if they need it. Because if you say, well, I'm going to give you the same amount of time that I'm going to give you, the example that's used, like the son came up and said, Mom, you're spending so much time with our daughter. She was like, that's because we're planning her party. And so we have to talk about what are the games that we're going to do? What are the events? What are the gifts? What is all the stuff going to be? He's like, and the mom said, if you need me, then when I'm done here, I'll give you that same time, love, and attention. And so where they can see that they do not need to be equal, they all will have their time and their opportunity. They can also trust that you will be there for them when you need them to be. And so another one was with food, and just like, oh, he got more than me. And then the mom or the dad said, well, are you still hungry? Like, do you want more? Because the problem is it equal? The problem is, what is your unique need?
Yeah.
And so depending on that need, that will determine how much time and attention you get is depending upon that need.
And we talk about that. So Vincent eats 6 or 7 chicken nuggets and Karen barely eats 3. And we just say, she's like, well, he got more chicken nuggets than me. And the answer is, he eats more than you.
What do we do when our kids start fighting? And this is a 5-step process. And this, you said it earlier, it's like we are not perfect, but we are constantly trying to get better and trying to make us today.
This yesterday, you were crushing this. Because it's the freshest we were reading the book.
Yeah, we're trying to be better today than we were yesterday, better tomorrow than we are today. And the only way that can happen is through this continual journey. And so when your kids start fighting, just take one of the things. I think there's 4 slides, and there's a bunch of steps to all of it. Just start in one place. Start first for the next 2 weeks. Just start writing down what are the fights that you're seeing, what are the conversations that are happening. Then even in your mind, if you can play out, well, I would do this differently if I had the opportunity again, and just start applying one of these things. And so the first thing that you'll do for wading through a fight, the first step is acknowledge the children's anger towards each other. I can see that you are feeling this way. I can see that what she did hurt your feelings. And then you could just listen to the other person and say, well, what do you think happened? And so then you just start this conversation, show appreciation that I can see that what you guys are dealing with is difficult. And so how would you like to solve it? And so the next step would be just having faith in them and just saying that I think you two guys can work through this. And so I see this is your side, this is what you were saying, I can see you're dealing with something difficult, but I really know that you guys can, if you sit down, you guys can really figure this out. And then you walk away. Because you ultimately want them to be in charge of solving all these problems on their own, so they don't have to come to you constantly, and it's also a life skill that they build in dealing with other people. And so say, I can see that you're feeling this way, I can see that you're feeling this way, I see that it's really difficult, but I have faith that you guys can solve this, and then just leave.
One of the biggest things that's probably coming up in you right now is, well, what if they're hurting each other? And that's a whole different situation. So don't worry. Just on this one, for an example, I would use Magna tiles as the example. There's only so many squares. Our kids fight about how many squares, the big squares, we only have like 11 of them or something like that. And they're like, I need this and I need this. And I'm like, wow, well, I know Vincent was playing with these first, and Karen saw how much fun you were having, Vincent, and now she wants to play. And that must be really hard. Is there a way that you guys think that you could have a solution? Or our newest problem with Magna tiles is that Honora, our 10-month-old, wants to come and be Godzilla. And so I've given my kids the opportunity and said, you should play on the kitchen table with the Magna tiles if you don't want Nora to do it, because she can't reach that. But they choose not to do that because he doesn't want to move or whatever. And so if I would just say, instead of trying to solve the problem, being like, I told you to go on the table, Vincent, with the dang Magna tiles, which is what I feel, I just need to say, I know that you can figure out how to build that in a way that Honora can't mess it up. And so Vincent's number one go-to is that he picks up the baby and moves her, and then she crawls back because she can move now. And so I said, but I know that you can figure out a way to deal with that. And then I need to leave the room. Problem in our house is we have 1,100 square feet and there's nowhere to go. Can't leave unless I go into my room, which is not where anything that I'm doing is. And so to essentially leave the room would be like to go to the bathroom and I mean literally count to 60. I don't know what to tell you guys if you have a small house. But the leaving the room part I know is the hardest for me because I just know I can get in there and fix this. But if we don't let them deal with the Magna tile things when they're outside playing together, then they're not going to be able to have conflict resolution when I'm not right there.
Absolutely. And I think that is another thing we've talked about in the past during these sessions. This is also a skill that you can look to see how are kids doing with this, and if they're not doing well, then you guys can set it, as the parents, you can set aside time. How do we have training in this as a skill when the stakes are not super high? Mm-hmm. So let's just create an artificial situation where we can practice, and this goes back to a lot of the stuff that we want to do in and through this, is that we want to create a family team. If you have a family team, teams have games, but before they go to games, they have practice. But if we just keep throwing our kids out and just saying, go figure it out, and never having time to practice, then that's where we can see them start to falter a little bit. So again, just acknowledge both sides of the argument, acknowledge that it's really hard, but express faith that they can figure it out, and then just give them that space to do so they can start figuring it out. Because again, the point is not to win today. We don't want May 28th to be the best day of our lives. We want our kids to be equipped for May 28th in 10 years. So they can be the best humans possible. But like Bridget said, when the fighting turns to something that seems like it's going to be more aggressive, this was bedtime last night where we started kicking and hitting and pushing. So we describe what's happening. Again, I can see that you're feeling X, Y, or Z, because again, just in the description, you help diffuse the situation. Then you establish limits and say, in this family, we're not going to do this. We're not going to name call, and we're not going to hurt each other. And so if you guys cannot do that, then we're going to have to be separated. So what happened, we were all laying in bed together, then Karen kicked Vincent, Vincent pushed Karen, and so I said, Vincent, you're going to have to go into your bed. Like we need to separate. And so again, this came straight from the book, that children should have the freedom to resolve their differences. Children are also entitled to adult intervention when necessary. And so if you see that things are going haywire and they're going to go past whatever the bounds are for your family, that's when you should intervene. Not to settle their argument, so you're not trying to fix the problem for them, but just to reopen the communication lines, going back to the previous problem. It's like, how can we figure this out? And there's even another book, Alfie Kohn, I think he talked about creating a partnership with your kids and just saying, how can we figure this out together, as opposed to reprimanding and punishing. How can we come to a solution together so you guys are working on the problem together, as opposed to saying, I don't think you should do this, go to your room, I'm going to spank you, and all the tirades that way as well.
Yeah, because when we help them think, right? They don't know how to think. That's the thing that all these parenting books we've read is like, kids need training and you are their head coaches. And when you think about it being a coach instead of a dictator, then it really starts to be important. The other thing that when they talked about kids fighting is there's a lot of really hurt feelings from the adults in the group that, you know, their parents had not intervened when their big brother or big sister had been fighting and they tickled. She said, my 2 brothers would hold me down and tickle me and they would never protect me. Or this guy had a twin and his twin brother would always beat him up. And his parents thought it was just roughhousing. And so one of the tools that she said is like, is this play fighting? Or is someone getting hurt? And then if it sounded like someone getting hurt, even like, no, it's fun, we're having fun, and then it got a little out of hand, she'd be like, well, it's starting to get out of hand. I don't think, do we have mutual consent? And then the next thing, oh, sorry, honey, I was ahead of you. Yep. And the other thing is saying, hey, I'm not comfortable with what you guys are doing. So even if they're play fighting and everything's great, our kids use the swords a lot. They love to hit sticks, and we always say sticks hit sticks in our life. They don't hit people, but I can get uncomfortable. I'm allowed to say as a parent, like, you know what? I don't like what's happening here. I'm starting to be worried, and so can we find a new thing to play?
Yep. That's great. And so there's 4 different levels to fighting, and so she gives kind of the 4 different levels and says, like, what could your action step be? And so level 1 is normal bickering, and she said just ignore it. Pretend like you're going on vacation or something and just leave it alone, and then just tell yourself that your children are going through a life experience that will help them problem solving later. Then level 2, the situation's heating up, adult intervention might be helpful. That's where you, again, go back, you acknowledge what's happening, take each person's side, describe what's happening, and express your confidence in their ability to solve the problem and then walk away. Then if the situation is possibly dangerous, then that's where you say, is this real fighting or is this play fighting? Let your children know that play fighting must be mutually consented to. So if one says, yes, we're playing, the other one says we're not, then we're not. And then respect the other person's feelings. If they are showing some sort of hurt, then you need to stop. And then if the situation is definitely dangerous, that's when you describe what you see and you separate the children and say it's not safe for you guys to be together right now. So just depending, and you're going to know your kids better than anybody else. And so you can assess the situation. And if it's a low-level situation where things aren't crazy, again, giving them the space to figure it out. As it escalates and gets crazier, that's when your intervention, again, and the intervention is not to solve the problem. The intervention is to settle down the kids until they can come to a resolution on their own. Mm-hmm. Because that's the ultimate goal, is to stop them from fighting. Not just, again, we don't want to make today great. If you scream and yell, then they'll stop fighting, but then you're not going to solve the problem for tomorrow and for the next week. But if you can give them the tools, then they can start solving the problems on their own.
So you might have gotten to this moment and been like, well, every fight that my kids has is dangerous. All they do is fight. And that's what this next 2 weeks is supposed to be, is you writing down like, okay, well, they hurt each other then, or they hurt each other this, or they did this thing. One of the examples was one of the girls cut off her sister's hair because they were complimenting her hair so much and never complimenting her. And so while she was asleep, she cut off her hair. Now, like, that's crazy. And there are things that people are like, I wish you were dead. I hate you. I wish you weren't my brother. Karen says that all the time. And I say, do you really wish you weren't sort of, well, don't you think that it would be lonely without your brother? Like, we have these conversations, like, well, if Vincent wasn't here, what would that be like? And then she's like, it would be sad. And then I was like, so do you really hate him? And do you really not? Like, and so talking them through those things are where you're going to go. But the first thing is like, let's just categorize what are your kids, how are they being in conflict? And how are you a part of it? Because what we know is that our kids learn conflict from us, and really, we don't really have a lot of conflict with each other. Not saying we're perfect, but we have a ton of conflict with them, and we have not handled it well. And so our 2 oldest have these tendencies of going straight to like explosive anger and name calling, because we're like, what are you, dumb? Like, you did this thing, which we should not say, but at the moment, in the heat of the moment, we're like, how could you dump all of this paint all over the floor? Actually happened, and handling that, or dropping something, or like dropping a gallon of milk and shattering all over the floor. And so controlling how we react, I think, is a part of the first 2-week homework thing.
Absolutely. And so what do you do when things escalate? And I think this is probably it's definitely for parents with kids who are at least a little bit older. I would say with Vincent almost being 6, I feel like he's probably at the start of this. Maybe we could do it a year ago, but 5 or 6 is probably going to be the ideal time. But again, you know your kid best. And so if you're trying to resolve something that's very difficult, this is where you call a team meeting of everybody. Everybody comes to the table and we lay out what is the problem. This is a problem that we're seeing. And then explain the ground rules. And so first we're going to hear from the troubled person, then we're going to hear the other person's perspective, and then we're going to write down everybody's feelings and concerns. We say, this is what you're feeling, this is what you're feeling, and allow them to go back and forth, allow them to have that banter, because again, that's how we get to resolution. And then we're going to say, okay, with everything that we just said, everything that you said, everything that we know that what we stand for as a family, how we want to exist as a family, what are the possible solutions that we have? And then everybody's going to decide this is what we can move forward with. And we're saying we're going to reconvene in 2 weeks and see how this is working. And this is something that, not this specific, but like team meetings is something that we're trying to get better at, is how can we one time a month come together and just, what is the state of the union? Like where are we at? What things do we need to work on? What thing, and we just had this conversation this past weekend, what thing, if we implemented it in the next 3 to 6 months, would be life-changing? And then just coming up with some sort of strategy in which we can execute that. And this could be a part of that. We noticed that the kids are fighting too much. Let's lay out the ground rules for what we want this to look like. What trainings can we do to help them gain better skills in order to have their conflict resolution on their own so we don't have to be a part of it? And again, just so they can have better life skills, and then again, reconvening just to make sure we're moving in the right direction. And so this was something that I was going to bring up earlier. I wasn't sure if we had it slide, so I'm glad we had it. Where just like if it was a knife, you bought Karen the knife, Vince was like, I want that knife. And then now they're fighting. And so like, how do you give support without taking sides? Because if Bridget said to Vincent, yeah, you can take Karen's knife, and Karen's like, but it was my knife. And now if Vincent doesn't get the knife, he's like, well, you like her more than you like me. And so how do we deal with this? And so she gave 4 different steps. State each child's case. So Karen, you got this knife because you've been helping in the kitchen. Vincent, I see you want the knife. You probably want a sword more. So, but let's just, if you want to get the knife, this is how you can do it. So state the value of the rule. This is how we're going to proceed moving forward. Leave the door open for possibilities of negotiation and say, if you guys want to work something out, you guys can work something out. And then again, you leave and walk away to give them the space. And I don't think I have the slide in here. She was talking, she talked about, she didn't say private property. Essentially that. She talked about where it's like, this is mine and I don't want him to touch it, essentially. So this is my knife. I don't want Vincent to touch it. And so in their house, they had bins, I guess, or some sort of space, which is like, if this is your private property, you put it in there and nobody can touch it without your consent. And so if this clicker was in my private property bin and Bridget wanted to use it, she would have to say, hey, can I go use your clicker? And then I would say yes or no. But not everything is in there. And then when the bin would get too stuffed, she would say, we have to go back and revisit to see, is this actually that important, or can other people use it? Because there are some things, and they use the example of tools, and they were saying that if Dad has a screwdriver and I need a screwdriver, he doesn't necessarily have to ask me to use that. But I have some very special things that if he were to touch that, I would be very upset. And so our kids have the same exact thing. And so giving them the space to say, yes, we can share this, but this is off limits. And again, you lay down the ground rules before.
We actually have this between us.
Yes.
Yes. Didn't we deal with this yesterday? I have a great phone charger. My phone charger charges phones better than anything. And I have 2 examples. And that phone charger stays in the wall. It doesn't go with us on trips, whatever. It's the best phone charger we've ever had in our life. True?
Private property.
It is private property. Vincent's like, I really need to charge my phone. No charger works.
Because my phone is old.
Yeah.
And
he's like, I'm going to take your wire. And what did I say?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. I was like, the reason that we have this good charger is because it never leaves the wall. No. And I was like, did you charge it while you were in the shower? And he said, no. I said, well, that was your opportunity to use it. And no, you may not take it. And he was like, I'm taking the wire. I said, you aren't, because it's my private property. And now we still have it to charge. He hated it. The second thing that we have is I have my own toolkit.
Yes, that's what I thought this was.
Yeah. So I have my own toolkit. It has pliers, it has screwdrivers, it has hammers, and everything is in it. And once
You've
it's
used it how many times?
multiple times.
Once?
Dozens of times. You're not home a lot. You're here working, providing for our family. And so I have this little like Amazon toolkit, right? But he has all the tools. So many tools. Ask him if he knows where any of them are.
Well, my tools are spread across all the different workplaces and businesses that we have. And so when I need tools at the house, they are out and about.
But so I have this toolkit, and he has to tell me that he's going to use the toolkit, and he has to show me that I put it away.
It's not private property.
You have to ask. Property. You have to let me know. And I say yes to using it. So these things will also help you in your marriage, guys. And you could think that's petty, but we've never had a screwdriver when we needed a screwdriver until I got my toolkit. And guess what? Anytime we need a screwdriver now, we got one. Hammer, right there. Boys, no tools anywhere. None at all. So just know that this also can help you talk to each other.
Yes.
You're allowed to have private property, too, with your children. It can't be the whole house, but you can have a bin.
That's right.
My bin is the toolbox.
So action steps, write down your problems that you see your kids having. Then if they are in a fight, determine the level of fight that they're in. Determine if your intervention is necessary. If it is necessary and you're not intervening to solve the problem, you're intervening to stop them from hurting each other. And then just express both sides. Label the emotion. That's a big one. Labeling the emotion helps diffuse the situation. Once you label the emotion, say, I bet you guys, I really have a lot of faith that you guys can figure this out, and give them the tools and strategies to do so. Try to avoid comparison at all. Try to avoid roles as much as you can, and just really try to build your family as a team, working to get better every single day. Keep practicing, keep growing as parents, and keep educating and motivating your kids as well.
So next month we are going to read a book on how to talk so little kids will listen, how to listen so little kids will talk, a survival guide to life with children ages 2 to 7. So the majority of you have a baby or two babies, and one is a toddler and is very difficult to talk to. So we know that we need to learn how to talk better to our kids, and everyone could benefit from this. This Siblings Without Rivalry book was born out of a chapter that they had in how to talk so kids will listen and listen so kids will talk, because the fighting chapter just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, that they're like, this is its own thing. And that's where this book came from. So hopefully if you love this book and you love these steps and our little Cliff Notes review for you, you'll really love next month's, which will expand outside of fighting and really in general, how to get a kid on your team, how to get them to listen and obey, and all of those different things. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next month.